and we came up with 4 peace scenarios or ways to end the war in Ukraine. And the first, of course, involves Ukraine negotiating from a position of strength. The second involves Ukraine negotiating from a position of weakness. The third was basically, which in a sense, the second and the third are very similar, because the third is just caving into Putin's demands and not joining NATO, not joining the EU, and staying neutral. And then the fourth was sort of a wild card that some external power puts pressure on both Russia and Ukraine to come to the negotiating table, whether it's President Xi of China or a US president or even Modi. I think the challenge is not getting people to the negotiating table. The challenge is getting the Russians to commit and to implement what they promised. And nobody trusts Putin for understandable reasons. Really? I don't think he's likely to accept anything unless somebody strong arms him. He's a completely unreliable negotiator. And so the Chinese or the Indians and the Chinese or some combination of people have to lean on him very heavily. Otherwise, he's just completely unreliable. And the Ukrainians know that. And they don't trust him, and they shouldn't trust him. And so, with Putin in power, it's very hard to see a situation where the two could come to some sort of working relationship going forward. It's just really hard for me to see that. I think the only external party that President Putin would listen to is President Xi of China. I think he's the only one he kind of respects, he looks up to, he may be even a bit fearful of. And so this is why it's been very disappointing that China hasn't done more to push Putin. The Chinese come up with these 10-point plans and 3-point plans and all sorts of things, but none of them really involve Russia withdrawing. They often involved Ukraine ceding territory. And I do think if Xi put a lot of pressure on him to stop for whatever reason, but I don't think it's in Xi's interest right now. I think she's quite happy to see the West being bled of weapons. I think they're quite happy to see Russia becoming a weaker power. I mean, don't forget, Russia used to be the stronger power vis-a-vis China, and now China is definitely the big brother. So I don't think they mind what's going on at the global level. But at some point, they do care about economics. They do care about their economy. They do care about the relationships that the Chinese have in Europe that are, a lot of Europeans are really upset with China for supporting Russia. And so at some point, I would imagine that they may try to turn to Putin and say it's time to end. I think the Kursk invasion, the Ukrainian invasion into the Kursk region of Russia has altered the stakes somewhat, because prior to that, I think morale was getting quite low in Ukraine. A lot of people were saying this is a war of attrition. You're losing. You need to go to the negotiating table, and sorry, you'll have to just make do with what you have now. This has kind of changed the stakes so that if they do say they went to the negotiating table soon, versus 6 months or a year, they're negotiating more now from a position of strength. Their morale has gone up. We don't know if there's some other strikes, some other aces up the sleeve of General Kursk in Ukraine that, he might have some other interesting initiatives. Something totally different happens, that Putin has a health event, or, something just completely unexpected could happen as well that could really change the trajectory of this war and end it sooner. If it doesn't end soon, it's going to be at the detriment of the Ukrainians, because of course the Russians have mass and material. As I say, they have way more people, they have way more weapons, they have more artillery, bullets, guns, and all of that. So over the longer this goes on, the more it will be in Russia's advantage. And they don't care about losing soldiers, as we all know, whereas the Ukrainians do. Unfortunately, I don't think the war is going to end in the next 6 months. So I think we're just going to be, providing more weapons. They'll be fighting. They'll be losing soldiers. They'll be trying to mobilize more soldiers on the Ukrainian side, and the Russians will continue grinding them down. Let's just say we get lucky and there is some sort of reason for people to go to the negotiating table. And I have a feeling that one motivation of Kursk might have been the U.S. elections. If Trump wins, he's likely to cut off aid to Ukraine. So that'll make a significant impact. If Harris wins, she's likely to support Ukraine. But it's possible that if she wins, that maybe Putin thinks, okay, my friend Donald hasn't won, and so I might as well just declare a victory and, and end this war, because it's a distraction for me too, by the way. It was a huge distraction for him. And there's got to be a lot of unrest and unhappy families and all sorts of things going on inside of Russia.